All right, welcome back to the Reality Show Life Coach podcast. Today we're going to talk about the last two episodes of the How to Get Rich series, episodes 7 and 8. So with me today, I have, of course, co-host Rachelle Siebke, and she and I are going to wrap this up together. So, Rachelle, I'm going to have you introduce yourself once again, just in case somebody's tuning in for the first time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Rachelle Siebke, and I am a money coach for life coaches and other heart-centered, purpose-driven business owners who want to make their decisions on anything other than their bank account balance, right? They're really looking for their richest, truest, most authentic lives. And it matters so much to me because I know that the more sustainable they are in their business, because their finances are set up, not only in their business, but also the reason we own a business is to take money home. I want to make sure that both of those things are in alignment so that they can continue doing the most important work that they're doing in the world. It means so much to me. And the other thing that is really important to me is that I specifically work with women. I work with men as well. I specifically work with women. I also work with couples, and I work with men who reach out to me as well. But the main heart of my work comes down to I want women to be fully resourced. And that means that they have the time, the money, the energy, and the decision-making skills to live, love, and leave any situation without restriction.
It's beautiful. And I mean, the work that you do, life-changing work, like just I don't think any of us can get away from like having to handle money in any way, shape, or form as much as we might want to ignore it or shove it away or just like put it on autopilot at any point. Like it impacts our lives and it has the power to do amazing things for our lives. So I love that that's the work you do. And it's been such like a joy to get to know you through this whole series because like it's given me a lot to think about. And I've had a ton of people reach out and just say, okay, wait, this is great. Stop in the tracks. I want to talk about this. So absolutely love it. I also want to mention if anybody's watching this on YouTube, because I do upload the videos from these podcasts to YouTube on my YouTube channel, the link will be in the show notes, is you might notice I'm in a different place today. I am in the local library. So I travel full time. And this week we just happened to not have great Wi Fi in our RV. And so I checked out a room at the local library in Monroe, Wisconsin. And like, thanks to them for hosting me today and hosting this podcast because it's such a great resource. I think sometimes we forget is that local libraries, they're here for us.
Totally. And I see you even have a door. So you're recording a podcast. I think so many people think about this when they're owning a business. They're like, oh, I need to rent an office space. Hey, check out your local library first. Maybe they have a booth that you can use that's private that you could actually record in, or you could have coaching call sessions in, or if you got like this amazing lifestyle like Linda's where you are location independent, you can totally do that even if you get somewhere and your Wi-Fi is not amazing.
Absolutely. And I will say I have been in places, Fayetteville, Arkansas comes to mind, Wichita, Kansas, where they have full-on podcast booths that are fully kitted out with sound like foam. They have recording studios, professional video recording studios. You could do like a whole course in them. You can check it out and use it. I have seen amazing things at libraries. So you might be actually really surprised when you walk in. You might have professional quality studio equipment in there and not even know it. A lot of libraries are upgrading these days. So just a plug for that is you might be surprised at what you can do for very, very cheap at your local library. So
I love a local
anyway,
library. Vote for local libraries.
yeah. All right. So, like I said, we're going to talk about episode 7 or 8. We check back in with Drew, Sarah and Reggie, Frank, and Millie and Christian. And the first thing I am absolutely dying to talk about is something that I know, Rachelle, you specialize in, is Ramit and Frank talk about Frank transitioning to be an entrepreneur and what is going to happen with his money. And this is something I've thought about a lot because I have gone from being a W-2 employee to an entrepreneur and the money is not the same. Like there's months where I'll sign several clients and then it's like a windfall of money, which we experience with Frank, and then there's months where it's nothing. And it's trying to figure out how to navigate that space where it's not the consistent flow that people are typically used to if they have been a W-2 employee. So, I mean, I just had a big note here. I was like, Rachelle, I need all of your advice, and anyone listening probably wants it too.
Yeah. I have so much love for Frank and that he has like such a great dream and he's willing to like go for it. And obviously, he won the circle. I didn't watch the circle. I know you said in the last episode that you actually watched the circle. So you probably have more background on that, but I want to go back one moment to a couple episodes ago where he said, it's hard for me to keep up making the content and doing the thing on the side of my full-time job. So many of my clients and me, myself, are also in the situation where, we keep our full-time job as our full-time job is the investor in our next stage, right? The investor in our business. And I know Rumi gave him several sort of like prompts. He was sort of like gently nudging him, like, wow, you're really going to do this. Frank's friend was extremely concerned. You could see her face like, you're going to quit your job. And I do want to say, everybody's risk tolerance is different. And it's not for anybody else to say what you should do, right? So if your risk tolerance is such that you're like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and go for this and see what happens, I'll figure it out. I know that Lynn, if you want to talk to that, like.
Yeah, I mean, that was my story too. I mean, we briefly had a house, during COVID. We sold the house. We did get a windfall for money on that. And that was one of the things that allowed me to go, you know what? I'm going to take the leap. It's very similar to Frank. There wasn't like this massive plan to go, okay, I'm going to go into business for myself. And here's the whole structural plan. And I know exactly, what's going to go on here. I was just like, you know what? Leap of faith. And I know and I trust myself that if I needed to, you can get another job or a part-time job or a full-time job or something. I am the income earner for my family. My husband has been working on his novel for the last several years. We're both following our dreams. It's something that we get super excited about, but it also comes with, you don't have the traditional stability there that a lot of people have. But it comes with, we don't have kids. So I think that for a lot of people, that might be a little bit scarier if you had a lot, like other people in your life you were caring for. But yeah, I mean, I was willing to take the risk because it's something that I've dreamed of doing for a very, very long time, with the knowledge that, like, yeah, at some point there might be a job that I go and apply for that'll help support the dream. But yeah, we just left for it, just kind of like Frank did.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to what Frank can do to
Yes.
stabilize his income in a moment. But I also like two things that I want to point out there. I think one of the things that you do that is the most beautiful is many of us will get a job and work hard and do the thing so that we can do the thing that we love most. And you took a calculated risk with a windfall and a dream, right? Like a very clear vision of what you wanted your rich life to look like was writing a novel and being a full-time coach and traveling around the US in an RV. So what you've done is actually reversed the order and that you're doing the thing that you want to do most right now. And I love that so much for you. And the second thing being, the only way that we can ever fully, truly run out of money is if we don't trust ourselves to make money when it's time to make money. So what I mean by that is I see people have a windfall or a stash of cash set aside, and they're like, yeah, but I don't want to spend that because what if I need it later? And it's a valid thing. And it's for sure like traditional financial advice that we're taught, like don't blow it all in one place. But if there's something that you want to do, if there's a big dream that you want to follow and you have an opportunity for it and you have a stash of cash for it, and you don't do it because you're afraid you might not have money later, you're running out of money now. ahead of time while you still have money, but you're running out of money in a different way, right? Like you're actually passing up on an opportunity that you have money for because you don't want to run out of money later, which really means you don't want to miss an opportunity later. So when you can trust yourself to always be your own source, to always be your own resource, you never actually run out of money. And I just want to point that out because I think it's an interesting twist on financial traditional advice.
Yeah, and I have really appreciated our conversations because I do think that there along the way have been these moments where I'll feel like shame or embarrassment or a little bit of guilt for the way that, we have gone about things because it doesn't follow maybe what Ramit would say to do or somebody else might say to do. And I think it's been helpful for me to hear your different perspectives on things because I'm like, you know what, maybe this is okay. Like the way I've gone about it, it's just our choice of what to do. And it may not be the traditional advice, but we don't do things conventionally in my household anyway. Um, but it's felt empowering to me because I was like, oh, this is my path. Um, and we get to navigate from this space. So I don't know. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to point that out because it's been helpful to me.
I'm so happy to hear that. And also, I want to just say, when I'm saying this, I'm not talking about the systematic structural oppression where people are actually out of, like, do run out of money or do not make enough money because there is a system in place that is purposely oppressing you from being able to live a life in which your resources are met. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a totally different issue. So I always want to make sure that when I say the only way you can run out of money, right, is I'm not talking about those scenarios. I'm talking about scenarios in which you actually are making your bills and you actually are having a stash of cash set aside and you still want to hold on to it so you don't miss out on an opportunity.
Yeah. Yes. And thanks for pointing that out too, because I do think there's some differences out there. And, and I am in like this fortunate category that I am able to do what I'm able to do, and pay the bills and all that things. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what is my advice for Frank as he is moving from a W-2 employee to an entrepreneur? So a lot of it, there's a lot of mindset things I think that will go into this. But today I'm going to talk specifically about systems, habits, and routines, because that is the thing, that is the tool that I use in my work. And I think that having some systems and habits and routines in place give us a lot of security. So I like to have a plan for the money as it's coming in the door, meaning as the revenue comes in the door, we have buckets or envelopes that we are putting that money in, and we do it the same way every single time. I like to use a system called profit first, which means every time money comes in the door, a certain amount of percentage goes aside to profit first, which is a percentage that you take out of your revenue and you do not spend on purpose. So it's not the same way that we think about, is your business profitable on a P&L statement? Like there's a whole thing about that, but I'm just talking about the money coming in the door gets separated out into a separate cash pile. And that is the money that you use to pay yourself a quarterly bonus. So I'm going to set that aside for now, because I think the most important thing here is setting aside a percentage that is going to be used to pay your quarterly taxes, your federal taxes at the end of the year. So this is super important for two reasons. One, a lot of entrepreneurs will get into not setting the money aside. And then when tax time comes, they don't have the money to pay their taxes. This specifically happens when we are in the red. And so quarterly taxes are not due because we're not actually making a profit. But then when we get to the point where we're finally making money, we haven't been setting taxes aside, and now there's a big tax payment. right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs will get caught in this, I haven't had to pay taxes. I don't pay quarterly taxes. And now I finally made it big, right? Like I've been planting these seeds for 3 to 5 years, and now I'm actually profitable. I've been like all of the seeds I planted are sprouting, and I didn't have a system to set aside, so I spent it. And now there's a tax bill, and now I have to put it on a payment plan. So that's one thing that happens, and it happens really frequently. So if you are in this category, please do not beat yourself up. Let's just like set up a system to not do it again in the future. The second thing that I see happen is a complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is I'm afraid to spend any of this money in my business because I know taxes are going to be due and I don't know what they're going to be. And, or I know that I'm probably going to want to invest in my business, or maybe get my own coaching, because as coaches, we love coaching. And then what happens is we don't pay ourselves. So now the reason we're in business is to pay ourselves so that we can live a rich life. And now we're not paying ourselves. And we're also sort of unintentionally teaching ourselves that we don't have enough money, like we're not doing well in business because we're broke, when actually you probably are doing great in business, or fine in business, or average in business, or the thing is working, but you're just finding more and more evidence that it's not working because you're not paying yourself. So I think both ends of the spectrum can be really sticky. So again, profit first, you set aside for profit, set aside for taxes, then pay yourself. There's a certain percentage that you pay yourself. And then you want to do that consistently. So you use like an average of the money, so that, as you said, some months you have really big months. Maybe you have a launch, and so somebody pays in full, maybe 6 people pay in full, but you're going to be serving those people for 6 months. So you don't have any more time capacity in your calendar to make more sales that it's going to be able to pay yourself again. So you want to pay yourself slowly over time if people are paying all up front. Or maybe you sign 3 new clients one month and the next month you sign none. So if you can figure out a way to set the money aside in a owner's comp savings account, and then decide what you're going to pay yourself payroll. So you set it aside in a savings account, and then you decide on what is my payroll. Is my payroll once a month and I pay all of my bills once a month? Is my payroll every 2 weeks? Because I liked that. I knew what that was when I was a W-2 employee. So make a decision up front and then automate the system. And if you don't automate it, then just make a plan, make a decision, and don't waver. Just do it every single time. Even if you make $100 or $500 and it doesn't seem like it's worth it, just do the same thing with the same percentages. It all evens out and it works over time. But the best thing about it is taking away all that mental drain on what should I do? What should I do? I don't know if I have enough, right? Like all of that goes away when you have a system that you follow on purpose with percentage amounts over time.
And then do you have recommendations on those percentages, or is it just different for everybody's business?
It is a little bit different for everybody's business. The book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz is what I'm referencing here. And his, I'm just going to use general targeted percentages for, I believe it's for businesses that are up to $200,000 in revenue. He recommends 5% for profit, 15% for tax, 50% for paying yourself or owner's compensation, and 30% for business operating expenses. And so when you do that consistently, again, you might look at your information and be like, I haven't ever taken profit. So the idea of taking 5% of profit, or I'm not making any money, there's no way I could pay myself profit. Start with 1%. It's just like Ramit said in this, he said, your investment plan is not, how did he say it? He said, I think it was like your investment numbers are not as important as having the plan itself. So I want to say the same thing here. How much you pay yourself, how much you set aside is not as important as that you are doing it and you are setting it aside. And then you're going to, just like Ruby talks about turning up dials, right? Just over time, once a quarter, you're just going to turn the dial a little bit more. And where that will likely come from is business operating expenses. A lot of small business owners overspend on operating expenses. It's really easy to get caught up in courses, shiny bells and whistles, different systems. I mean, I can't even tell you how many systems we've all signed up to learn from, right? And then we take their like subscription that they recommend. And then, so looking at that all at once can be really overwhelming. But when you're like, okay, and I have had clients that I worked with in the past where they like looked at it and they were just so distraught. And like, this is like, I don't like any of this, right? Like, I feel worse now. It's better to know, and then you can make some changes. It's just like, I think it was Drew when they were looking and he was like, oh, I need to make more money. Like, that's the bottom line. I need to make more money. So sometimes it can be, oh, the bottom line is I need to make more money so that my operating expenses stay the same, but I'm making more money and it's still within that 30 percentile. And sometimes it's, this is the most money I'm probably going to make because I'm at my time capacity. I'm at my price hike capacity for right now. And maybe I don't need some of these things that I thought I needed, or I would really like to have these things, but what I like more is to go on the vacation that my family wants to go on. So I need to make sure, or maybe it's pay a bill, or, we want to make sure that we are paying ourselves before we're committing to a monthly nut in our operating expenses. So the monthly nut is what I like to say, this is your bare minimum to stay open. Do you know what that number is? Knowing that number is really powerful, because then you can choose, what do I want to do versus what do I wish I was doing, right?
No, that totally makes sense. And I know this is just like the crash course on how you would recommend things, but I also know that you do this within your business, right? Like somebody could come and hire you to help set this up. Is that right?
Absolutely. So my favorite way for people to work with me is to work with me for 6 months over time, because we're going to do all your personal finance and all your business finance. We're going to do it in 6 months. And I handhold you through the whole thing, meaning I'm actually on the call doing the systems while you're on the call. So you're not getting a bunch of homework that is just going to leave you spinning and confused. But I do also offer what I call a quick win, which is easy payday. So you can work with me for 3 sessions for 3 weeks in a row, and you'll have this whole profit first system set up when you leave.
Amazing. Yeah, because I was gonna say, I know for myself and probably others, is like you hear this and you're like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And then it's the spinning. So I love that you offer that service, because I could, as entrepreneurs, it's helpful to know like what is out there for you. Did we cover everything you wanted to talk about in that section?
I will go quickly through some other things. So that's the whole thing about money coming in the door. You also want to do the same sort of thing for your money coming into your personal checking account. So know what you want to do with the money as it's coming in. I like to use a software called YNAB. It's a acronym. It stands for You Need a Budget. My clients call it like Tetris for money, or gamification of your money. I love it because it's a simulation. You can decide, okay, this much money is coming in this month and this much money is going out this month. And then you plug your numbers in and you can really quickly see, eek, I made a wrong decision there, but you're making the decision ahead of time and you can adjust. So I love to use YNAB for that. And again, you're setting up your YNAB not in this like wishy-washy, I hope it works out this way, but in these are the things that I dream about. These are the things I desire. These are the places I want my time and my money and my energy to go to. And then I like to also, one of the last things that we work in is, what is my business not already providing me that I want in my life? So whether it's more things in your business, like giving yourself better benefits than any employer will ever give you. Lots of paid time off, right? Sick time, health insurance, life insurance. What are the benefits that were available to you when you were working a full-time job, if that's your situation that you left? Or what are benefits that I've never had because I've never had a full-time job, right? But like other people talk about, sick time, and I would sure like some sick time. Like, how do we set that up so you get that? So it's either in your business or in your take-home finances. So maybe it's a remodel. Now we know, okay, what's your budget for this remodel? You also want to take a vacation. You also want to go out for dinner with your girlfriends once a week. Let's figure out what that looks like, how much that is. And now we have a revenue goal, right? So like if we think about Frank, and he's like, oh man, he has to cut brunch, right? What we would do with Frank is like understand what his monthly net is at home. And okay, this is what you need, right? I think they were looking at his conscious spending plan and he was like, okay, 4,000, I'm pretty sure I can bring in. And then it was like, I don't know, 5,300 or something, or 5,800. And it was like, okay, you're short this 1,800. So now we have a revenue goal. Like, how do we create $1,800 more in revenue? And we know exactly where it's going to go when it comes through the door, which can also be a motivator in your business to make more money when you know what it's going to do for you when you bring it home, versus just the idea. I think we all are like, well, if I made more money, then I would be able to have a rich life. It's like, let's decide and then do it on purpose. So that's the other thing. And Ramit on the street, that little segment there that we saw, where people were stopping and asking him, I'm a freelancer, I'm self-employed, what should I do? Where should I put my money? So don't forget to invest. So many of us business owners are so committed to investing in our business, but don't forget to invest in your future, at least some percentage. You can use a Roth IRA, or if you're incorporated, you can use a SEP IRA or a 401k. Again, I am not a certified financial planner, so I will not be able to give specific advice on that, but just to know that there are containers to do that. And you want to be doing a percentage, start with 1% today. If the only thing that you do when we end this podcast is start 1% today and then turn it up to 2% next quarter, right? By the end of a couple of years, you'll be up to 15%. And it's so important that you don't wait until one day when you're rich. I think Ramit also talked to Drew about this, right? He was like, I don't care if you have debt, I want you investing in your future now, even if it's only $50.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important piece of advice, because I do think it's easy to go, well, I'm not making that much money, or I'm in the red and it's just like a little bit. But you're absolutely right. Like, once you scale up and you start making more money, it's like if you don't have it in place to begin with, or you're afraid to look at it, it's not like, oh, now I'm making, I had a great month. You're suddenly going to be willing to look at it. You're probably you still have the same brain, the one that didn't want to put those systems in place in the first place. And what I really like about this too is I am not like heavy on systems. Once I get something set up, it's just like, all right, wash, rinse, repeat. I probably do laundry the same way as when I learned when I was in the 5th grade, right? I'm just like, I'm not learning new skills, whatever, this works for me. I just throw it in, press go. And so it's like, I think that's the thing I always assumed is like, oh, this is going to be complicated. I'm going to have to, talk to a CPA, and it's going to be really hard to have those conversations, and I'm not going to understand what's going on. But if you make it very simple and like straightforward and automated, which is what you're recommending, which is what Ramit recommends, it's like, it's just there for you, and it gets to support you, and you can like learn to feel safe around it versus I'm scared to look.
Yeah.
What if I can't have the things I want?
Yeah. It's the difference of having your own back and having your back up against the wall. Ramit talks in the episode like, hey, you don't want to be in a space where your back is up against the wall, right? I believe he's talking to Frank when he says that. And what he's saying is, when your back is up against the wall, you've got no creative energy. You have to do what has to be done in order to pay the bills, in order to survive, in order to eat, in order to whatever, right? And so when you have a system in place, that is having your back. It's helping take care of your current self and also your future self.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, and this goes for people who are employees as well. I know that for a lot of people, there can be a fear of what if I'm fired?
Mm-hmm.
What if I don't sign those next clients? And, you know, it's if you have a system in place, if you have money set aside, if you know where it's coming and going, you don't have to be as afraid of that thing happening. I think it's just like having that in place. I mean, granted, everybody is different and everybody has a different relationship with money, but I know for myself, like I have been fired from a job in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like, if you know, like, okay, the next several months, I've got that figured out. YNAB is great for helping you with that because the whole idea there is that, like, oh, well, I know, where the money, like you have it dialed out for the next 6 months or whatever amount of months. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of it too. Is just like you can have your own back if you have a system in place.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? Like we all know as life coaches, like your circumstances do not actually create the way that you what your results are. And um why not make the circumstance, right? Be in your best interest so it's easier to think those things, so it's easier to feel those ways, so it's easier to take those actions, so it's easier to get the results that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's a lot easier for many people to think thoughts like, oh, I'm going to be fine no matter what. If you're like, I have that emergency fund set up for myself.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that's what it's there for, emergencies.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. Thanks for asking. What did
Yeah, I
you
know.
want to say about Frank? And you probably have a really great perspective on this as well, as this is your lifestyle. So what would your advice to Frank be?
I mean, honestly, my advice to Frank would be like, hey, you've got some great help with Ramit right now, but just keep finding that help. If it seems out of reach, like, oh, but I don't have the extra money to go and hire somebody who does something that like Ramit does. We started out this conversation talking about the library. There are resources out there, lots of them, and I see you nod right away with this. I mean,
Mhm.
um, I think there's this idea that like, okay, there's going to be this huge barrier to entry there, but it's like part of being an entrepreneur is knowing like, hey, here's the DIY version of it, but there's also people out there willing to help. Maybe there's a swap for Frank. Maybe there's, something else there. So I guess that's kind of where I often go with things is how can you get scrappy with it in order to get to your dreams? So
Get scrappy with it. I love that. That so matches your risk tolerance too, I think. So,
yeah, yeah. And did see you nodding vigorously, like, oh yeah, there might be some, accessible resources out there. Do you know any offhand that
oh
like
my
you point
gosh.
people to? Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I can fit this whole stack in my hands, but this is like literally the stack of books that I always keep beside me because I'm constantly giving people recommendations. And so I put together a resource. If you go to my website, RachelleCP.com/, well, actually, just go to RachelleCP.com and there's an opt-in right there that says fund money. And I don't think you need any more money rules because these books are full of them. Like, pick one and go with it. But the fun money guide that you sign up for there has a favorite money books resources. And it's most of the authors are women. I do have a few white male authors on there, but I know that it's important to my clients and the people that I work with to start thinking about money as something that is not just for rich white males. And so there is a variety of different types of authors and different types of advice. So I think that's a great place to start. And if that is too overwhelming for you, just email me at RachelleCP.com, Rachelle at RachelleCP.com, and I will just ask you some questions and point you to one book to start.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I think too is to throw back to our last episode with Shiloh, like finding great money role models. Like it can be really helpful just to like populate your feed with some people that you feel like give great money advice, right? So it's like top of mind. I mean, one of the things that that we see in these episodes with Drew is he starts going to these job fairs and whatever. It doesn't like come to fruition in that job fair. But what Ramit says that really resonated with me is that like when you start taking these actions, you send a message to yourself that you're investing in yourself. You're sending your message to yourself of change. And so I think any of these small things you can do listening to this podcast, it starts sending the messages like, hey, maybe the way that I've always done things, or if just left to my own devices, this is how it comes to be. Like with Frank, like brunch, money just goes out the window. Like he's buying slippers and stuff. He's not like super conscious about things. When you send yourself a message of like, hey, maybe I can do this differently,
Mhm.
like, you start thinking differently. You start feeling differently about it. You're more willing to look at things. Your actions are different. And so I think not discounting those little things and like what
Mhm.
impact that can make on you.
Yeah. And so in the life coaching world, right, we call this collecting evidence that it's working. And so one of the things that I'm doing right now, I have a quick win client that I'm working on, the easy self-pay days that we were just talking about, the profit first system. And she was calling and she was asking me some questions. And, you could kind of tell she's a little bit disappointed, like, oh, I didn't get the thing done because I got to this point in the question asking and it was like a no for me. And I was like, yeah, but now you know, right? Like, notice all of the things that you did that were really good with money while you were doing that thing, right? So, like, the task didn't get crossed off, but you learned something, you asked somebody that you respect, you talked about money, right? You started like searching for like what is important to me here, what are the things that I don't even know that I don't know, right? Like those are all good things. Those are things that people who are good with money do. So build the evidence that you are doing the things. I think probably 85 to 90% of the things that we do with money are good with money. And then there's the 15 or 10% of things that we do that are like, like maybe, and you hear Ramit talk about that too, right? He'll say like, I think with Millie and Christian, oh, they're doing some really great things, but they're doing a couple bonehead things, right? But the only thing that we see when we think we're not good with money, when we're not collecting evidence that we are good with money, is the things that are like need to be tweaked. It's like those things can be tweaked when you're willing to have awareness about them. And you're more willing to have awareness when you think you're good, when you think you're doing it well.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, going back to Drew and the networking, Ramit has a class called Dream Jobs. I actually took that course. It's fantastic. Those interviews that he's talking about, really interesting. I mean, I would recommend anybody have these interviews. They're great for networking calls too. And building this networking skill. And I thought it was so great to see Drew because he was like, man, I could have been doing this 6 years ago. Like nothing has changed other than my mindset. And when Ramit says, yeah, 9 out of 10 of these are probably going to go nowhere, which I kind of disagree with because I think 9 out of 10 of, I mean, I think a networking call is always worth it. But he said 1 out of 10 will change your job search. So just think about that. Yes, with the interview calls, but the networking calls, right? The things that we do to build our businesses and also the things that we do with our money. If 1 out of 10 things that we do will completely change the game, so worth doing them.
Yeah. And you never know what's going to happen. So it's like staying open to it. I mean, I have gotten all of my last jobs through networking. And I was like trying to wrap my head around. I'm like, how would you even find a job these days if you weren't just like reaching out to your network and just asking questions and whatnot? I have gotten jobs just by offering value, just by,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sending a message and just being like, hey, do you need help with this? I will volunteer or whatever. And they're like, actually, do you have skills around this? Like, I want to hire that. So you
Yeah.
might be surprised at any sort of approaches like that, but I think it surprised Drew. I mean, he says at one point, maybe a little judgmental on himself, like, dang, I could have been doing this 6 years ago. And it's like,
Mm.
well, of course, all of us could have been doing many things many years ago, but we know today. We know differently today, or somebody brought something to our attention and now we have different options we didn't know were there before.
Yeah. And can we talk for a minute about his results? He said, which I really think was a downplay. He said, it's a lateral move, but I'm making twice as much money. That is not lateral.
No. I think, yeah, he was just like, well, it's the same job. I'm like, for twice the amount though, that's life-changing amount of money for him.
Mm, yeah.
Life-changing amount.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, well, and I know like we talked about money as it comes to business, but we also wanted to talk about money as it comes to relationships because I mean, I think you had some stats in here which I'm going to make
Mhm.
you read because you know them better than I. But we hear Millie and Drew saying, I don't want to be overly reliant on my partner. I don't want to depend on them. I want to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And you had such amazing points about this, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Yeah. Thanks for setting the stage for that. So I see this a lot with my clients. The idea of joining money. So you can do money a couple of different ways. One is like everybody joins their money and everybody has a joint account, or people keep separate independent accounts, or you make one financial joint account for everything coming in and out of the house. And then each individual has their own guilt-free spending. That's my personal favorite. And the way that I love is when couples get together and they do it the way that Remy is suggesting with Millie and Christian. Christian makes 3 times as much money as Millie, and Millie insists on paying half because she
That was a
doesn't want to
surprise.
be dependent. Yes.
That was a surprise to me. Her resistance to having any other way of doing things.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I get it.
because, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I get it. I mean, I get it. Like she thinks of herself as being a strong woman who has her own business, who's making it happen, who relies on mindset. Like she's changing so much about her life and she's making it mean that he makes more money and she makes less, that like there's something wrong with the situation or there's something less about what she's doing. And she's putting a lot of emphasis on that 50%. And I mean, it's actually holding them back,
Mm.
holding her back.
Yeah. So what ends up happening when you are disproportionately paying into the joint finances or disproportionately dividing, right? So I have some clients that keep everything separate, and then it's like, I'll pay the big things like the mortgage and the bills. You pay the groceries, the daycare, and the travel. And pretty soon, lifestyle creep makes paying that random shit a lot more expensive than paying the big overall bills. And the person who is making the main percentage of money and is paying the main like monthly net type of things also is the person who has paid benefits and also is the person who is invested heavily, right? Is like maybe they're maxed out on their 401k at work and maybe they have a Roth 401k and they're just looking at you like, yeah, you're just not very good with your credit card. I don't know what you're going to do about that situation. Because they're not looking at the numbers. They're not really revisiting the numbers as their lifestyle is creeping. And because the other person is thinking, I'm just not good with money. I've never been good with money. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I guess I'm just really bad at this. I've helped 2 different people that I can specifically think about in ways that I think there was a lot of gender socialization that came up in like, yeah, women are just bad with money and bad with credit cards, right? And I don't think it was anything that was ever explicitly said. It's just sort of this undercurrent of belief. And what we don't realize is how many of the joint household accounts were going on that credit card. And then they were trying to make up for big expenses that really were joint expenses. And because they didn't want to look at it because they had shame around money, and they didn't make the same amount of money as the other contributor, right? And so doing that work is really helpful, like looking at those numbers and having these discussions. Nobody actually wants to be in the situation where they're making less money and contributing more when they can actually see it. And what I want to say is like reverse it the other way, right? Because I do think that happens a lot, the way that Millie was like, I don't want to be dependent, at Drew as well. I don't want to be taking advantage. But on the opposite end, like we see with Christian, like we see with Mikey, hey, I love you. I don't want you to struggle. They just don't know because they're not having open conversations about money.
Yeah. And that's the part where it's interesting to watch because you do see the partner saying, "No, I want to contribute more because I make more." And then the other partner saying, "No, I don't want that." So it's kind of like, how do people meet in the middle there? Like, what is the mindset work for somebody to
Mm-hmm.
be able to accept the different percentages?
That's a really great question. I think it depends really on the individual, like what's going on behind why do you not want to be dependent? Um, but what I do think is this is a great place to point out, when we are afraid, right? When our thought about the thing is, I do not want to be dependent on you, and we insist on making equal contributions, you literally become more dependent because you are paying equal portions, meaning you have less portions for yourself, right? And the other person is paying equal portions, but making much more, and they have more portions for themselves. And so if, God forbid, the relationship ends, which I'm not wishing this for any of these couples, and they all seem extremely lovely and very committed. So I don't think that this is a danger for them. And at the same time, we don't want to ignore the fact that half of all marriages end in divorce, but second marriages, and even higher rate, 67% of second marriages end in divorce. And I think it's 73% of third marriages end in divorce. So let's not make our plans based on we're going to be together forever. Let's make our plans on like what's happening today. What are our numbers today? What can we do to equally contribute today so that I also have space and I also have room to, especially if you are a business owner who is with somebody who has a corporate job, who has benefits and has life insurance and has retirement investment 401k set up. You're a self-employed person. You want to make sure you have a percentage of your things going to yourself too, because not only are you then not dependent on your spouse, but you're not dependent on an employer. So we think that these are good things, right? To not be dependent on somebody, but when we're adamant to not become dependent on somebody, we actually make ourselves more dependent because we're contributing more than we have to contribute.
Yeah. Well, and I think too is it's not like there is a definition that's like this is what it means to be independent and this is what it means to be dependent. There's no like, okay, here are the parameters, right? So somebody could be like, you know what? I am self reliant, but I put in 25% of mine and they put in this percent of theirs, or we both put 50%, but the 50% number is different. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that then Millie is dependent on Christian. It just means that they have a financial arrangement. She can still think about herself as being independent, and it doesn't matter what the numbers are going in and out. I think it really is like a state of mind is like, hey, if we split up, do I got me? Do I have my own back? It goes back to what we were saying about Frank. Like, is your back up against the wall, or is there a system in place that means, if something happens to the other person, God forbid, it's like, yeah, you know what?
Mhm.
I still got me.
I'm so glad you said that, because again, the number that we're contributing is not the metric for whether or not we're too dependent. And also, why is it a problem to be dependent on the person that you're partnered with? Right. So like those are the things that we would really be looking at. What is the mindset shifts that we would need to change in order to make the percentages not a problem? But the other thing that I want to say too is the second part of these statistics were why, like what comes into play for end of relationships. And it's a very high percent. 58% of couples reported arguing and excessive conflict, 45% that they were married too young, and 38% because of financial problems. So just imagine if you can have conversations around financial problems. Now you're addressing the 58% of people who are arguing and have excessive conflict, and the 38% of people who are having financial problems. Like that's a huge percentage change to put you in a different statistic category altogether. So being able to
Absolutely.
have that conversation about dependency and contribution changes the game for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think too is regardless of what anybody takes from this show, any of the cast members, anybody watching it, you really do see a shift in demeanor for every single cast member by the end of it. Whereas, I think Matt and Amani were a really good example of this. They were like one of the first couples we meet on the show. They start out really like standoffish with each other, really defensive, really short with each other. And by the end, you can see they're looking at each other. They're like open with each other. Their body language just indicates something else is going on for them. You see that in a lot of the couples. So I think even if it's like, the math of it hasn't been all ironed out yet, there's still some boneheaded habits in place. Like
Mm-hmm.
if some people can connect differently about this and it isn't an immediate argument and you're like the door is open to talk about this, I think that that's kind of some of that evidence that change can happen.
I'm so glad you mentioned Matt and Amani again, because we can literally see them, their body language completely change, where they just are melting into each other in the most beautiful way because they have been able to connect in a way that they weren't connecting. And they are also another great example of I don't want to be dependent and not splitting the contributions equally, right? And so who's to say that contributions are only financial? We've had lots of discussions. I think if you haven't heard those discussions of the past episodes, definitely go back and listen to those. If you haven't watched the series, it's only 8 episodes, and they're short, super bingeable. Some of the comments I've gotten on Instagram messaging with people about this is like, oh my gosh, I binged that series so fast. I wish there was so many more. It's such a great way to think about so many things with money and broach so many conversations. So I think between those 8 episodes and these 4 episodes and the few lives that we're doing, gives you a lot to think about.
Absolutely. And I think honestly, for anybody, a good first step, if you're like, how do I think about this for myself or with my partner? Just put it on. Just put on the show. Like, I know that
Mm.
for myself and my husband, this spurred a lot of conversations just watching it together. I've had a few clients say the same thing. They're like, I just turned this on. It was great too to hear like their kid was in the room, right? Like, okay,
Yeah,
amazing at this early age. And so just even exposing yourself to different ideas like this is like a way to start like shifting things for yourself. Um, and if you want even more than that, Ramit also has a great podcast where he talks to couples. So there's endless resources out there.
absolutely. He has a great podcast where he talks to couples. He's got a great book, audiobook. I actually have his book in a paperback format, in a Kindle format, and in the audio format. I love all of them. And he's got some great courses. And then the next thing I would say is, I mean, he's amazing. He's got great content. And if you're looking for somebody who will work with you one-on-one, look around for other people that have that sort of format, right? Like use it as a base so that you know what you want to look for if you can't, get on the show and reach Ramit one-on-one or run into him on the streets and ask him some Ramit on the streets. Like look for a coach who can work with you one-on-one.
Absolutely. Well, as we wind up here today, this very last episodes, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I think for me, I think I just wrapped it all up. Like just look for the resources that are available for you already. If you don't know how to get started, just watch an episode and you will soon be in this wealth of, I see things differently. Ooh, like what's one thing I want to work on? And just one thing. You don't have to do all of the things. So this is one of the things that I say with my clients a lot is I've been doing this and building my systems for 20 years. They didn't look like this the first time, right? So I've got a client I'm working with right now. She's extremely like, ooh, what do I need to do? I need to fix this. I need you to tell me what to do so I can get this fixed. But like, listen, just as Ramit said, you did not get here overnight, right? It took you 30 years to get to the point where you are in your financial life. You do not have to change everything over 1 week. Allow yourself to just do one thing and then really think about like, what is the big decision I can make that makes all of these little decisions like less relevant.
Absolutely. And these podcasts don't have to be the end of the conversation. Rachelle and I are both on Instagram. You can message us all you want. I'm at Lynn Grogan on Instagram. And Rachelle, what is yours?
Rachelle Siebke Money Coach on Instagram.
Yes. And all these links will be in the show notes. I know we had some books and some tools and all of those things we've mentioned throughout the episode. So those will definitely be in the show notes. And so thanks for joining me, Rachelle. It's been amazing, this whole series.
Lynn, thank you so much for accepting my pitch. It's been so fun.
It's been a joy. So thanks for joining us today. And until next time, bye now.